Yesterday, my mom found a new Gen Z word, Delulu, and that was the beginning of the end. She asked me what it meant. I said it means being a little unrealistic. A little. Apparently, she only heard unrealistic. 5 minutes later, she was staring at the ceiling and smiling. I asked what happened. She said she was mentally preparing for her future mansion. We live in a 3-bedroom apartment. Then she said she already had the energy of a billionaire. My dad got interested immediately. Because nothing attracts Indian parents faster than confidence with zero evidence. Dad sat down beside her and asked if Delulu was a government scheme. Mom said no. It's a mindset. That was somehow worse. Within 30 minutes, both of them were discussing what color their private helicopter should be. We don't even have a parking space. Then Dad found a motivational reel. The man in the reel said, "Believe in yourself." Dad heard, "Become a legend." Now, he was walking around the house like a startup founder who had just raised $100 million. Mom started calling him a visionary. I started updating my emergency contact list. By evening, they were completely gone. Reality had officially left the chat. The next morning, things got worse, much worse. Dad announced that Delulu should be shared with society, literally society. He called the security guard downstairs, then the milkman, then the vegetable vendor, and somehow all of them stayed. Dad began explaining Delulu like he was revealing ancient wisdom. The security guard nodded seriously. The milkman took notes. The vegetable vendor asked if Delulu worked on Mondays. Dad said Delulu works every day. Mom looked proud, like she had just invented electricity. By lunch, they had formed a group. They called themselves the Future Legends. The security guard said he could feel success approaching. The milkman said he already felt rich. The vegetable vendor said he was mentally preparing for interviews with billionaires. None of them knew any billionaires. Dad didn't let details stop him. He said details are just negative energy. At this point, I genuinely considered moving schools. Then they started making plans. Huge plans, ridiculous plans, impossible plans, and somehow everyone became even more confident. I was watching 5 adults speedrun collective insanity. 3 days later, Dad booked the community hall. I wish I was joking. There were chairs, a projector, a microphone, and actual attendees. People came voluntarily. Dad walked on stage like a celebrity. Mom sat in the front row taking notes. The security guard applauded before the presentation even started. The milkman brought snacks. The vegetable vendor brought support. Dad introduced the first lesson, "Think bigger." The crowd cheered. Then think even bigger. The crowd cheered louder. Then ignore reality. The crowd lost their minds. At one point, somebody asked how to become successful. Dad said step 1 is believing, step 2 is believing harder. And somehow that got a standing ovation. The entire hall looked inspired. I looked for exits. Mom was already planning interviews after her future success. The security guard was imagining magazine covers. The milkman was mentally accepting awards. The vegetable vendor was preparing his autobiography. Nobody had achieved anything, but confidence was at an all-time high, and somehow Dad became their leader. By the end of the workshop, the entire colony was cheering. People were clapping, celebrating, taking photos. Dad stood proudly on stage. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time all week, Dad accidentally said something intelligent. He looked at everyone and said, "Being Delulu is fine, but do your homework too." Silence, the entire hall froze. Mom froze. The security guard froze. The milkman froze. Even the vegetable vendor froze. Because after 3 straight days of nonsense, Dad had somehow spoken facts. Everyone started clapping, again, this time for the right reason. The workshop ended, people went home, reality was finally returning, or so I thought, because while we were leaving, Dad's phone lit up, he stared at the screen, his eyes got bigger. Mom immediately leaned in, the security guard leaned in, the milkman leaned in, the vegetable vendor leaned in. I already knew it was over. A giant word appeared on the screen. Sigma. Dad smiled. Mom smiled. Everyone smiled. I picked up my suitcase because apparently we're doing this again, and honestly, I'm thinking about moving out.